I've buried friends. I've watched my body betray me in ways I never saw coming. I've sat in rooms full of people and felt completely invisible. And I can tell you this, nothing in life prepared me for what happened between 65 and 75. Not raising children, not losing a job, not heartbreak, nothing. That decade didn't just age me. It changed me, quietly, ruthlessly, and without permission. If you're approaching it or watching a parent walk through it, pay attention, because what I'm about to share is what nobody ever told me. The day I retired, I thought I'd feel free. I had spent 4 decades showing up. Early mornings, late nights, deadlines, decisions, people counting on me to have the answer in the room. And I told myself, when this is over, I am going to breathe. I am going to finally rest. I earned it. So when that last Friday came, I shook some hands, smiled for a photograph, and walked out the door. Monday morning, the phone didn't ring. Tuesday, same silence. By Wednesday, I was standing in my kitchen at 9 a.m. in clothes I hadn't bothered to change, holding a coffee cup, staring at a wall. And I couldn't tell you what I was supposed to do next. Not because I had nothing to do, but because for the first time in 40 years, nobody needed me to do anything. And that is a feeling I was completely unprepared for. See, we spend our whole lives building ourselves around what we do. Your work is not just how you earn, it is how you exist. It tells you when to wake up. It gives you problems to solve. It puts people in your path who see you, who need you, who call you by a name that means something. And when it's gone, when that structure disappears overnight, you don't just lose a job. You lose the answer to the question, who are you? I had to rebuild that answer from nothing at 65 years old. I had to ask myself what I valued, what I still had to offer, what kind of man I was outside of the title I'd hidden behind for decades. That is not retirement. That is reinvention. And no one warned me how hard reinvention is when the years behind you outnumber the years ahead. I used to walk 5 miles without thinking twice, not as exercise, not because someone told me I should, just because I could. I'd lace up my shoes on a Sunday morning, step outside, and go. No plan, no route, just movement. And my body would carry me through it like it was nothing, like it had an agreement with me that I never thought to question. Then one morning, I bent down to tie those same shoes, and something in my knee sent a message so sharp and so clear that I had to sit down on the edge of the bed and wait for it to pass. That was the beginning. Not a dramatic moment, no emergency room, no crisis, just a quiet, ordinary morning where my body pulled me aside and said, "Things are different now." And the hard part was realizing that wasn't a warning. That was a new permanent. Between 65 and 75, the body stops being something you live inside freely and starts being something you negotiate with every single day. The medications appear. First 1, then 2, then a handful you organize into a weekly pill case like some kind of ritual. The appointments stack up. The specialist for this, the specialist for that. You start reading the labels on food you've eaten your whole life, because suddenly your body has opinions about things it never cared about before. And none of that is the hardest part. The hardest part is the gap. The gap between who you feel you are on the inside and what your body will allow you to do on the outside. Because the mind doesn't age the same way the body does. In your mind, you are still the man who moved furniture, coached the weekend games, stayed up until midnight without consequence. But your body keeps a different calendar. And learning to live inside that gap, without bitterness, without surrender, without losing your sense of self, that is the quiet, daily battle that nobody prepares you for, and that only the people living it truly understand. The body changes. The man inside doesn't have to. It doesn't happen all at once. That's what catches you off guard. Nobody sits you down and tells you that somewhere between 65 and 75, your world is going to get smaller. It just does, quietly, gradually, one absence at a time, until you look around one day and realize that the circle of people who used to fill your life has thinned in ways you never saw coming and never had the chance to prepare for. Friends start disappearing. Some move away, closer to their children, to warmer weather, to a slower life somewhere you're not. Some get sick, and the visits become phone calls, and the phone calls become shorter. And then, one afternoon, someone tells you the news, and you sit with it alone, because the very person you'd have called to talk about it is the news. And some just drift. No argument, no falling out. Just the slow, invisible pull of separate lives moving in separate directions until the distance between you becomes too wide to cross. And the world doesn't pause to acknowledge any of it. The children are busy, and I mean that without a single drop of blame, because busy is what we raise them to be. The grandchildren are growing up at a speed that almost feels unkind, moving through their own lives with the beautiful urgency of people who have no reason yet to slow down. The neighbors wave from driveways. The community you thought would always be there turns out to have been held together by routines that retirement quietly dismantled. And so the days grow still. I remember sitting in my living room on a Tuesday afternoon, no particular Tuesday, just one of many, and realizing that I hadn't had a real conversation with another person in 3 days. Not a meaningful one, not the kind where someone looks at you and actually sees you. I had been spoken at by a cashier and exchanged pleasantries with a neighbor. That was the sum of my human connection for 72 hours. That is not loneliness as a mood. That is loneliness as a condition. And it settles into the bones differently than any physical pain I have ever known, because there is no prescription for it, no appointment that fixes it, no test that measures exactly how hollow a full house can feel when the noise of a former life has gone completely quiet. What I needed, what so many men and women in this decade desperately need, is not sympathy. It is presence, someone to show up, someone to sit in the room, someone to make the ordinary feel like it still matters. Because loneliness at this age isn't about being alone. It's about feeling like the world has forgotten you're still here. At some point, without even realizing it, you stop counting forward and start counting what's left. It isn't a decision you make. It isn't something you sit down and choose one morning over coffee. It happens on its own, slowly, the way the light changes in late afternoon without you noticing until suddenly the room is different. One day you're making plans with the assumption that time is abundant, and the next day you're doing a kind of arithmetic that nobody teaches you and nobody warns you is coming. How many summers, how many holidays around a full table, how many mornings where everything is still okay? And that counting changes everything about how you see your past. Because when time begins to feel finite, truly, viscerally finite, not just as a concept you've always known, but as a reality you now feel in your chest, every unlived moment surfaces. The trips you kept postponing because work was too demanding. The conversations you avoided because the timing never felt right. The people you loved carelessly, assuming there would always be more time to love them better. The version of yourself you always planned to become once things settled down, and things never quite settled down. Regret at this age does not arrive loudly. It does not storm in and make a scene. It tiptoes. It finds you in the quiet moments, early mornings before the house stirs, late nights when sleep won't come, and it lays every unmade choice down in front of you without a word. Just the weight of it, just the stillness of sitting with the life you actually lived, measured against the life you always meant to live. And what makes it heavier is that you understand now, with a clarity you simply did not have at 40, exactly where the detours happened. You can see the moments you chose comfort over courage, the times you let pride win when humility would have saved something worth saving, the words you swallowed that the people you loved needed to hear. You see all of it, with the kind of precision that only comes when you finally run out of the luxury of looking away. But here is what I want you to understand, because this is important, that reckoning, as painful as it is not the enemy. It is the invitation. It is this decade pulling you by the collar and saying, you still have time, not unlimited time, but time, so use it with intention, use it with honesty, use it with the people standing right in front of you who will not be there forever. The calendar is not your enemy. Regret is not your sentence. They are simply the loudest teachers this stage of life offers. The question is not how much time you have left. The question is whether you'll be honest enough to use it well. We taught our children everything we could think of: how to ride a bicycle, how to shake a hand firmly and look a person in the eye, how to work hard, save money, show up on time, treat people with respect. We sat across from them at kitchen tables and passed down every piece of wisdom we'd gathered, every lesson life had handed us, every warning we wished someone had given us earlier. We poured into them everything we knew, and yet nobody, not one person, ever sat across from us and taught us how to grow old. There is no preparation for the moment your child has to help you with something you once did without a second thought. No manual for navigating the slow erosion of physical independence while trying to hold on to your dignity with both hands. No guidebook that walks you through the particular kind of pride that has to be quietly dismantled when your body begins to need what your spirit is still too stubborn to ask for. We arrive at this decade after a lifetime of being the ones with the answers, the ones who carried others, the ones who fixed things and provided things and held things together, and suddenly we are expected to know how to receive, how to lean, how to say the two words that a lifetime of self-sufficiency made feel almost impossible. Help me. And most of us were never taught how. I spent years equating strength with independence. If I could handle it myself, I was fine. If I didn't need anyone, I was solid. That was the definition of a capable man that my generation inherited and never thought to question. And so when this decade arrived and the needs began, small at first, then undeniable, I didn't reach out. I managed in silence. I pushed through when I should have spoken up. I sat alone with struggles that the people who loved me would have gladly shared, if only I had let them close enough to see. What I had to learn, slowly, painfully, and later than I should have, is that receiving is not weakness. Allowing someone to love you through your limitations is not failure. It is, in fact, one of the most courageous things a person can do at this stage of life. Because it requires you to put down the armor you've worn for 50 years. It requires you to trust that the people around you will not think less of you for being human. It requires a kind of vulnerability that nobody applauds, nobody celebrates, and almost nobody models for us when we need to see it most. Aging with dignity is not about pretending the losses aren't happening. It is about walking through them openly, honestly, and with the wisdom to know that you do not have to walk through them alone. It is about choosing connection over pride, presence over performance, and truth over the exhausting fiction that everything is fine when everything clearly is not. That is the lesson this decade has the power to teach, if you are humble enough to let it. And if anything I have shared today has spoken to something you recognize, in yourself or in someone you love, then please carry it forward. Share it. Talk about it. Because these conversations are exactly what evergreen wisdom exists to have. Subscribe to this channel, because every week we bring you the kind of honest, human truth that this stage of life deserves, and that nobody else is saying out loud. Growing old is unavoidable. Growing wise enough to do it with grace, that is the work of a lifetime. I'm 75 now, and I can look back at that decade and tell you, it was the hardest stretch of my life. Not because of what I lost, but because of what it demanded of me. It demanded that I redefine myself, that I sit with silence, that I make peace with a body and a timeline I couldn't control, and that I finally learn to ask for help. If you're walking through it right now, I want you to know, what you're feeling is real, it is valid, and you are not alone. And if you're watching someone you love walk through it, slow down, show up, say the thing you keep meaning to say, because this stage doesn't come with a second draft. Live it right, the first time.